Hello everyone, welcome to Internally Screening. Today we're going to be doing another director tier list of everyone's favourite director and foot fetishist, Quentin Tarantino. Today we have
Adam, hello.
And who else do we have?
Oh, it's me again! You thought I was gone, but I'm back, baby!
Unfortunately for our viewers, Jacob is here. He's seen all of the Quentin Tarantino films and invited himself along. I do apologise. But yeah, we're going to be ranking everything from Reservoir Dogs up until Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because we don't care about that other first film that Quentin Tarantino did that only nerds have seen. We're going from F tier to S tier. I don't think we're qualifying the quality of all the films in terms of how much we like them. It's more how good are they for being a Quentin Tarantino film. So even if it's like something we'd consider to be a great film, it might be B tier in the context of Quentin Tarantino,
right, sure. Right? Yeah, that's
good. Kind of what we did with Tim Burton.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
okay.
I'll go with that.
So, any opening thoughts on Quentin Tarantino, Jacob?
Yeah, so there is a reason I'm here besides the fact that I have no other friends. I'm very hit and miss with Quentin Tarantino, probably more so than most. I think he's a great director of the micro and very poor often at the macro, is the way I kind of see it in my head. I think he does really good so good at directing interactions between two characters on screen, and you'll have these super intense either monologues or these incredible conversations, but what those mean in the context of a world and the Tarantino cinematic universe that he's created often falls really flat for me, and it often feels like they occur in a void. And as we'll get into, I think some of them that works really well, and sometimes it really actually affects my enjoyment because I feel like everything he's doing is so isolated. There's no context or consequence to what he's hit to the film and the actions in that film to me.
From what you just said, I can imagine that you probably quite like the first film we're going to talk about, which is Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, so like first film, super budget, and is kind of a micro film, if you want to put it that way. It's like probably the smallest, well, not quite, but one of the smaller scope films that Tarantino's done.
Yeah.
Very much kind of like almost a theatre play in the way that it's written and filmed. What do you lads reckon in terms of where that would rank in the tiers?
Well, I'll throw my hat in and say A tier. I think it's a great start from Tarantino, and one, it works fantastically as its own film. Like, it is an amazing mission statement in so much as cementing so many key aspects of Tarantino's style, not least what Jacob was talking about, his brilliant dialogue writing ability, which is kind of almost second to none, really. Or
well, it's very distinctive.
It's so distinctive, but like so many have tried to imitate him in the years since, and so few come close to achieving that kind of it's a delicate balance between sort of a naturalistic and a very like heightened style, because there is a naturalism to it, but the topics people talk about are always so bizarre and unnatural.
Well, there is a recurring theme throughout Quentin Tarantino's filmography of people having long conversations while in incredible pain, which is kind of like begun with this film, which is mostly people talking to each other whilst severely injured.
I mean, Tim Roth spends the entire film in a pool of his own blood.
Yeah. What do you reckon on Reservoir Dogs? Did I guess correctly in saying that you probably quite like it, Jacob?
I agree with Adam in that it's a great opening kind of mission statement for this is what I'm going to be doing. This is a taste for what's to come. And I think this is an example where it works. You've got this warehouse, essentially, is the main setting for everything. And you don't know much about these people, and you don't need to. All you need to know is that they are heist men and something's gone wrong. And that's all you need for a context of a film.
Well, I feel like his writing just kind of brings a level of personality where you can fill in a lot of the backstory for these guys.
And I think some of that comes in with the naming as well. You all named just after colours. That's incredible. That's up to you to attach the name and personality to these people.
There's also a level of subtlety to it. Like, have you ever heard the thing about, there's the great opening scene where they're just all getting breakfast and just chatting about stuff. There's that great Easter egg that I heard where when the waiter comes up and says, who didn't give a tip? It's Tim Roth's character who immediately says, oh, it was him, he doesn't give tips. So, I guess, spoiler, if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, what the fuck are you doing? Spoiler, because he ends up being the snitch. He like snitches in that first scene,
right?
Which is kind of a genius little writing detail. And yeah, I just think the film is just so clever in that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's like very twisty and turny. Despite the fact that it's so low key, it never really feels like it dips in excitement or energy. No. Like it obviously has like emotional lows and like high points, but it's just so well written and stylishly done. You watch it and you feel like you just want more. Yeah.
And I think it's like, well, it's I think maybe the shortest Tarantino film, other than maybe
Death Proof.
Other than Death Proof, probably. And so you very much are left at the end of it wanting more. But I think that's the clever thing with the way it's paced, is that it's never lingering too long on any one thing. It doesn't draw itself out. It's like incredibly efficient and economic with its time. And quite possibly the best example of the capsule film in terms of like
one of the best, definitely.
In terms of like films that are locked down in one location and like have to tell their story from such a limited place.
Well, I also love the moments in the film where it leaves the location and you get like a little bit of backstory and you get, you know, these little snapshots of the outside world, but it always kind of comes back to that warehouse.
Yeah, I think that anchoring is another really good feature that, as we'll get into some of the next films, you know, that I think is kind of lost in some of the later films, is having that anchoring that kind of keeps you, giving you almost an observational platform from where you're at. I've got my context here, what's going on around this. And that for me is what this film does really well. I think also it would be, as is one of Tarantino's signatures, is the blood and violence.
No, true.
No way. I never noticed.
And actually, by his standards, this one is very tasteful.
Yeah, no, it is.
Large amount of blood, but only limited violence, I suppose.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's still pretty violent, but we all agree on A tier, basically.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Jacob?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to use A tier?
Yeah. No. We're all smooth sailing for now. I'm sure that will change very quickly, but
very, very quickly, because I seem to recall, Jacob, that with Tarantino's next film, widely regarded as one of the greatest films of all time in cinephile circles, Pulp Fiction. I seem to recall, Jacob, you have quite a controversial take on this one, so why don't you have it out?
Yeah, this film sucks. I think this film is a mess. I think this is a film of almost designed to sell t-shirts, it feels like, more than it is a story. And this is where I think it's the most Tarantino, but unfortunately for me is therefore the most probably not the most off-putting of his, but for me, I really do not gel with this. It's a film I've gone back to 3 times because I'm like, well, I must like it. Everyone likes this. And every time I've ended up not invested remotely in any of the characters. And as a result, even if, you know, some of the classic lines in this, I just don't care. It's almost like it's being said, like I said, said in a vacuum, in a void. It's almost like you've just, he's just written some things for people to sound cool, but I don't.
Well, you're wrong. So basically, Pulp Fiction is a great film. I guess I can sort of understand your criticism, but it's not really a mess. If anything, the film to me feels incredibly like meticulously precise in what it's doing, and the way that it arranges the narrative of the film like a pretty simple, but the first few times you watch it are quite deceptive and slippery Rubik's Cube that you have to kind of piece along in your head as you go along with it. And the way that it's structured kind of initially seems like, you know, you could probably just tell this story linearly and you would have maybe a more consistent effect. But the way that it's cut up adds a level of intrigue, and kind of the first time anybody I found watches Pulp Fiction, they're kind of taken aback by, what, that's already happened, what's going on here? And it adds a level of intrigue to the plot that is otherwise maybe not that interesting of a story. But I think that when it's arranged in such an interesting way and has that, keeps you guessing in the way that it does, I think it's actually like kind of genius. And on top of that, I just think this film, like Pulp Fiction, is basically to me just a film that just has so many great scenes. And like there are scenes in it that like are basically just two people once again just having a conversation. I think about like the bit with Bruce Willis and his girlfriend, which is just a scene of a couple just having a sort of lively conversation in a hotel room, and I can almost like picture it in my head as to like, you know, how the camera moves and what the characters are doing, and the way that I think it's hilarious. It's got like some of the funniest jokes that he's ever written in it, like people just getting, you know, randomly killed, and some like amazing one-liners, some of the like most bizarre tangents that he's ever gone on. I just think like in terms of just a film that's just completely full of life and just has so much spectacle in such a small and interesting way. It's kind of like a heightened reality kind of film where it's not quite real life, but it still feels very authentic. And because it sort of exists in that between space of feeling very lived in and real, but also kind of this strange reality where you have a man with a gimp slave rapist dungeon, and you've got this kind of mystical suitcase, and you know, all of these strange characters' lives just intersecting over the course of basically like one day, basically, right?
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most amazing films ever.
I would add to that, and you know, affirm once again, Jacob, you are wrong. But also that yes, we do have the same opinion on most of these films. Which is why you're here. But anyway, I think the characterization of everyone in it is amazing. I echo in terms of like the amazing scenes, like the whole Bruce Willis sequence in particular. I adore coming in with the non
sequitur of that bit,
him hacking someone with a katana.
No, the bit with the Pop-Tarts, where it just like every time I've ever shown
Pulp
Fiction to someone who's never seen it, the bit where John Travolta just comes out the bathroom and immediately gets fucking blasted. It's just like such an amazing.
Or him killing the rapist with a katana. That's just fucking amazing.
And how painstakingly slow it takes him to pick a weapon. I think that's one of the best camera pans of all time, where it's just like slowly panning across the wall, revealing more and more weaponry he could use, and he's just kind of going, ooh. It's just so like wonderfully comical and stupid.
But I mean, it's you know, I love everything Rupert mentioned about it. I think there's some amazing iconic performances in it. It helped establish Samuel Jackson's career, and it also revived briefly John Travolta's career before he insisted on killing it again, because
for a little while he did Face Off as well, remember?
Yeah, well, but John Travolta loves killing his own career.
Oh yeah,
these are the facts. What I would challenge you on, Jacob, is you saying that you feel this film exists in a vacuum, and you may mean it in a different way, but I really love the way everything in this story interlinks, and it feels it's so organically paced, even in spite of its non-chronological order, and all of the characters, as well as being brilliantly written. The way the film is written interweaves them in such a neat, organic way that the vacuum of that, say, their conversations and like the sort of Tarantino-isms isn't lost in a sea of just kind of, oh, here's a conversation that doesn't really go anywhere. Everything is kind of purpose-built, and everything works together in such like a nice layered way. But I don't know if that's what you meant by in a vacuum, Joe.
Well, one more thing though, people also like to criticize Tarantino for being like overly crude and using like spectacle. This is kind of like a brute force way to impress an audience. But people have to remember, like, this film ends in a gun hold up in a restaurant where someone just talks him out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the best monologues ever. Yeah. And that's just how the film ends. They just leave, and that's the end of the film.
It's the one
like the way that he manages to pace that to be the climax of the film is amazing.
It's the one that says bad motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I mean that it's before Rupert rudely interrupted, it feels like a nicely wrapped ribbon but with no present in the middle. It's very intricately woven together, but there's no substance to what that's wrapped around. To me, this feels like, if I was looking for a comparison, I'd say a film like Snatch, for example. It's a similar sort of concept in that you're following all these wacky, very different characters in their lives that are inexplicably linked by a central thing.
Yeah.
I think in this, it feels like it's just people living wacky lives, but without that central thing. And that's where I lose my point of reference. And so from scene to the first time I watched it, from scene to scene, I'm thinking, it's written so that these people will eventually meet these people. And obviously that's film writing. You wouldn't have, here's 7 different short stories about 7 different people who never meet the end. But the fact that there's no context to the world that they're in, it feels like these are the only people that live in this entire city. That to me is why I'm just like, I don't care what's going on in this world of 12 people. And so that's what multiple on the second and third watch, that's what I found. Knowing the story, I was like, but I just, why should I care? And the film, and to me, I'm not sold on how it's written, to the point where, you know, it is sudden when John Travolta gets shot, but at the same time I was like, I really felt nothing for his character being dead. And also the wackiness then also kind of contributes to that kind of not caring about the action that does happen.
I think the difference between this and something like Snatch is that I think Snatch is mostly linearly told.
It is.
Yeah, but it's just multiple stories. There's more of a plot-driven reason for the people intersecting, and the film is much more... There is a plot
gravity dragging them together.
Yeah, it's more straightforward. I guess that's just down to taste at the end of the day, but I personally kind of like that some of the characters' relationships to one another are kind of coincidental, because it's kind of, the film is kind of like, to me, seems to be about this kind of chaos theory idea of like, if this one thing didn't happen, like this kind of remote thing, like the bit where he goes with the guy's wife, what's her name? Uma Thurman, and like there's like that random heroine subplot, which is also amazing, just as a sequence. And, you know, has this dinner with her. You know, if that didn't happen, then these other things would have happened. Like, you know, if that didn't happen, then at the end of the restaurant, maybe he would, you know, have considered leaving the life. But obviously, like, he gains something from that interaction. He then ends up staying. And then, like, obviously Bruce Willis's tangent or has like all of these interconnecting things where, you know, if this one thing didn't happen, if this one thing didn't happen, you know, like everything could have turned out so much differently. It's kind of like the coincidental nature of how the characters relate to each other is kind of the entire appeal of the film to me.
And I guess that kind of I would say that contradicts Jacob's point about it being in a vacuum, because sure, it does have this specific focus on these characters, but yet the film is trying to tell a narrative of, like you say, a kind of chaotic, everyone is getting pulled together unpredictably into various scenarios, all because of like vague loose connections. And that kind of is saying, like, it's kind of like this whole city, all of these people that don't necessarily know each other or have anything to do with one another are all like pulled together. So there kind of is that element to it in my mind. But it was interesting, as Rupert says, like there is an element of taste to this in terms of how thoroughly plotted a narrative you prefer. So obviously, like, you know, Snatch being a fair comparison to make as a more plot-driven storyline. I'd be interested, Jacob, I don't know if you've seen films like Dazed and Confused.
I have not.
But like, you know, there films like that where you kind of, there isn't really a
You're just kind of there
to
hang out with the characters.
Yeah,
there's not really a plot so much as there are just characters.
See, I don't even hang out with you guys if I don't have to. So.
If it's not business related, Jacob.
Yeah, exactly. Unless I have an objective, why the hell am I there? And I think that kind of summarises Pulp Fiction. No objective, and therefore I have no interest.
Well, I think me and Adam both think this is S tier. So where can we compromise?
Yeah, where would you put it if it was just your list, and then where can we find a mid-ground?
If this was just the Jacob list, are you sure you want to unleash that on the world?
I just want to hear
it's not going to go on screen.
You're fucking don't think you have that kind of power here, Jacob. I'm editing this.
So throw in just my list and nothing else.
Where would be Hot Tub Time Machine like 10 times in S tier.
The Tarantino edit.
If it was me, I would put it in D tier.
That's ridiculous.
I think there are. This is a film of moments, and you know the monologues are good. There's no way I'm denying that. But they just carry so little weight because to me they feel inconsequential and so coincidental.
Okay,
that's one of the most psychotic opinions I've ever heard.
No, but it kind of makes sense. Given that we've kind of contextualized it, Jacob's taste is more that he prefers these kinds of driven.
He likes steak and chips.
All right,
this is now just a personal attack.
But okay, but it kind of makes me feel a bit better in so much as I feel like Pulp Fiction is a sort of film that Jacob wouldn't like anyway. It's not like he hates these aspects. Moving on. I'm trying to fucking dig you out of a hole here, Jacob. I'm trying to meet you.
I'm John Travolta. I want to dig myself back in.
All right, so we're both S tier.
Yeah.
So that's 2 S tiers, which should pull it higher. But we can't go S tier.
I would compromise with an A tier.
All right.
A tier.
A tier is. I think A tier is.
Feels wrong for one of the greatest films of all time. But
well, if it was better made, we wouldn't have this problem. But here we are.
Right. Anyways, Jackie Brown. is the one Tarantino film that most people haven't seen.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, I think most people haven't seen it.
I mean,
Apart
this was
that
the one
and
I'd
Death
not even
Proof.
heard of before this.
But I think more people have probably seen Death Proof just because it came out in the Grindhouse thing. But
Right.
Jackie Brown is also the only film he ever made that is an adaptation of something that already existed, starring Pam Grier and Samuel L. Jackson and a bunch of other people, Robert De Niro, of course. I think this is like kind of underrated, but it's still not one of my favourites of his, but I do really enjoy it. What do you guys think of Jackie Brown?
I enjoyed this. This felt like if you took away all the kind of... I'm going to be inflammatory, fuck it. If you took away all of the clown makeup from Pulp Fiction, you'd be left with Jackie Brown.
The clown makeup, fuck you.
Come at me, comments. The film itself, like you say, it's talk about being underrated. I think even the story itself is quite understated.
Yeah, definitely.
It's got that kind of tone to it, but it's just it's subtle. It's like a smell that you kind of like. You're going, what is that? That's what the film is to me. I really found myself kind of intrigued, despite the fact it's not filled with those same moments that Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs have. I think it's consistently keeps you interested.
I think it's his most chill film.
Yeah,
it's surprisingly unviolent for the large part as well.
Yeah.
Apart from a couple of
bits, but
even then, it's not like gratuitous.
It's weird that he made what feels like probably his most mature film, like as his like third ever film.
Yeah, that is.
And then like later just went back to
just do what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the result of Tarantino being mature is no one thinks about it. So
yeah, sadly, it's sad to say because it has some amazing performances in it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good film just by virtue of the quality of Quentin Tarantino's back catalogue. That makes it, unfortunately, one of the lower ones. I don't think it's great in the way some of his other stuff is, and that's not just because it's understated. I do think there are like a few problems with it, but I think Pam Grier is amazing in it.
Fantastic.
I think Robert De Niro is excellent in it. It's a very odd performance for him.
Very odd character because he's kind of barely there for a large part of the film, and you're like, you've got Robert De Niro,
and he's like a Seth Rogen type who just sits there stoned.
He's just like a fat, useless, like misogynistic douchebag who just has like I kind of love his character arc of just sat around smoking weed, being useless, and then like the way it culminates at the end is just so funny because you don't really see him as what he becomes until it happens. And also like Samuel L. Jackson in this I think is excellent.
He's so threatening
with his weird wig with the long hair.
Yeah.
And also shout out to Michael Keaton in this film. I think he's excellent as well. There's a great scene where he's doing an interrogation, and I think he did this on purpose. It just triggers me specifically. But there's a scene where he's interrogating Pam Grier, and at this point in the film, like you really hate him because he's like essentially picking on the middleman, Jackie Brown, who is clearly not the problem in the situation. She's just someone who's trying to get by. Sure, she's committing a crime, but like he's obviously like he's got this someone who he sees as vulnerable, and he's trying to like use her in a way. And there's a scene where he's investigating her, and he's like chewing gum the whole time, and like man, when I watch it, I just like I hate him so much, and it's just because that like the chewing gum thing plus is like
just that little
like this is like those kind of details are so good. I guess the main problem for me with Jackie Brown is it's kind of a heist film, and I don't think that the heist in it is very good or fun to watch or interesting. It kind of builds to it. There are other things that happen in the end that I think are more interesting, and I absolutely love the ending. It's kind of like one of his most romantic films. I really like that element of it. I think the core romance of it is like really sweet.
We should give a shout out to Robert Forster as well. The other half to Pam Grier.
He's excellent.
He's fucking
fantastic.
Great.
I think I didn't actually find Samuel L. Jackson's character particularly threatening. He had an air of threatening about him. But like the way that he's always kind of like surprised by everything that's happening, and the way he's like, what? Like
kind of. It's the way he just dispatches Chris Tucker by being so friendly and then just fucking murking him. It's like quite unnerving because he seems like such a cool guy. Like, wow, these guys are great friends. And he just fucking
that's one of my favourite scenes in the film.
That's a great bit.
Yeah, I think this is it kind of subverts your expectations, and the characters subvert your expectations throughout. In a good way.
It also has a fire soundtrack. Now, obviously, that's the thing with a lot of Tarantino films, but I think
didn't even mention that for Pulp Fiction.
I think, true. But I think particularly this one, especially also given it's underrated and not many people would necessarily be as exposed.
It's also a very different soundtrack to what Pulp Fiction is. It's much less bombastic. It's more like old soul songs.
And the fact that they're specifically kind of interwoven into the narrative as well, because like she's listening to them and she introduces Robert Forster's character to some of the things. He goes out and buys to them. It kind of becomes a fundamental element in their blossoming romance. So like, not only does the music sound amazing, but it ties in
definitely.
really well. I guess in terms of rounding off my own opinions on it, I think of this film more positively than you do. I really rate its quieter pace, and the fact that it doesn't build to like as massive a crescendo. It kind of, in my mind, grounds it in a more naturalized setting than say something of the level of Ocean's 11, say, where it's just so ridiculous. It's still a good and enjoyable film, but it feels very heightened, and this film feels much more like believable.
What I'm saying is about that final sequence is that heist thing with the bag, I can't remember exactly what it's like, a bag of money, right?
Yeah. They do
the way they exchange it, they show the same thing like a bunch of different times, and nothing really changes with each new perspective you get. So to me, it's like they could have done a more subtle heist, but to me, the point of showing something again from another perspective is to show something new or like something different.
They do show stuff new. It's kind of getting different characters involved at different points along the way.
It's not. But they kind of reveal most of the information the first time round. So when you're watching it, the new information you get, for the most part, is the information you get at the end, and that's more of a problem with the structure than the actual content. Because, for example, when you follow Robert De Niro and Samuel L. Jackson's girlfriend back out into the car park, you get one of the best moments in the film. And there's a bunch of good moments in there. I just don't think that showing us this not very interesting moment, in my opinion, repeatedly, it just kind of wore thin for me. But and it's just the way it's placed in the film. It's like, I feel like this is such a significant part of the film, and then it ends up being everything around it that's more impactful.
Okay.
But, yeah, for me, this is like a B tier Tarantino. Not to say it's like a B tier film, but more that in the context of Tarantino.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, I would put, like, in the context of films, this is an A tier to me, but I think, in Tarantino, I think B feels most appropriate for it.
Yeah, the way you put it just then makes sense. Again, I would do the same thing in the context of all films. A. Here, B. Yeah. All right. B tier it is.
Kill Bill 1. All right, now I'm ready. Given what you said about Pulp Fiction, I'm ready to disagree hard with you here. But I'm just going to open up and say this is the best Quentin Tarantino film. Kill Bill 1 is hot fucking fire. It's one of the best films ever made. It's one of the most exciting films to watch ever. It's so much fun. It's got so much going on. The Uma Thurman is amazing in it. Everyone in it's amazing. It's got some of the like best stylish cinematography I've ever seen in my life. Some of like the greatest action scenes I've ever seen in my life. And it's just, for a part 1 film, it's so great. And the non-linear element of it works perfectly. Again, I fucking love Kill Bill 1. It's my favourite Tarantino.
We'll do this like a compliment sandwich, Jacob, where Rupert says something positive, you say something negative, and then I say something positive again. So, Jacob.
Well, here comes the shit filling.
Okay.
To be fair, I think this film's fine. It's better than Pulp Fiction to me.
Okay, we're on better ground than I thought.
I expected worse.
Yeah. But this is a film that never left an impact on me. I thought the ending action sequence was cool, and that's all that really sticks with me about this film. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself. It's much the same of Pulp Fiction, as it's so over the top, but it's better in that, you have got this central idea that's kind of being revealed, for better or for worse, as we'll get into. But yeah, for me, this is like fine. This is, to me, is like a funny action film that you'd go see and go, oh, there was a cool action sequence at the end, but...
Incorrect. Okay, incorrect. And not only... Okay, so the whole vacuum argument, I don't care how strongly you want to stick by that, Jacob. This film, it completely falls apart, because this has such like a completely essential core theme to it around, her suffering as a woman, the misogyny, the way she is like disregarded. Like there's so many central themes about her womanhood that are like heightened to unreal extents with the fact that it's intended that she's murdered, she survives it miraculously, which is very Tarantino, very heightened, and then she's raped in the hospital, she loses her child, she thinks her child is dead. Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers.
Whoa, I hadn't seen the second part yet.
For all of the 5 people that haven't watched Kill Bill. So I think, sure, it has this insane presentation style that you could, I guess, if you wanted to be really cynical about it, brush aside as being like purely aesthetic. But I think it really ingrains it in I think kind of having different chapters in different styles, particularly that I love the anime style.
That's a great bit. Yeah.
Not only is it a great change of pace and like really fits the story it's telling, but it's directly ingrained with the character, and
but it also just gives you a lot of really useful information.
Yeah, and it shows Tarantino's love of other forms of filmmaking from different regions. Like he borrows a lot from like blaxploitation in say films like Jackie Brown. I mean, he literally gets Pam Grier in that film, who is a blaxploitation star, and in this he's paying far more homage to like old samurai films,
70s kung fu.
Yeah, like kung fu films, like East Asian cinema in general, and he sort of ties all that together with this incredibly powerful story, and then he adds the most insanely violent scene, so violent that they actually had to make some of it black and white so they could get around the censors.
I love that.
Like I don't know if you knew that was the reason that scene's black and white, Jacob.
I didn't know.
But basically, there was so much blood in it that they wouldn't let him release it. They were like, this will be unrated and therefore like cannot be seen by like
barely anyone. I don't think you can show it in cinemas.
Yeah, something like that. So he was like, right, fuck it, I ain't getting rid of the scene. I'm just gonna make it black and white. And again, in a weird way, because the film has been so aesthetically heavy up until that point,
it just kind of works.
It works as just like a non sequitur of like, oh, of course he made it black and white. If you're gonna have an anime section in your film, and the opening fight scene where she fights,
where she just shows up at the house,
where she fights Vivica Fox, and she's like killing her. Like they have to stop the fight because the kid comes home from school, and they're covered in glass and blood. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this,
and it has the greatest like intro fight noise ever. Though.
Oh yeah,
that's so
good. Yeah. I don't, Jacob, I can understand why you would sit down in front of Pulp Fiction and go, this isn't for me. I love that film, but I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of your personal preferences. This, I'm sorry, I have no idea where the fuck you come from in this. Like, this is such a vibrant film on every level.
That's why I love it. It's just so full of character.
Every single box. Every single one. How can you not love this film, man?
Explain yourself!
Your Honour. I'd seen Pulp Fiction first, and I think when I saw, you know, this over the top, the kid comes home, which is comedic. You know, it's supposed to be like, you know, that's not like a.
It's kind of like an awkward moment thing,
yeah. Oh, awkward during a fight, and I'm like, oh, it's more of the same. So I think, you know, I was kind of like, I'd got some unconscious bias going on, I think it's fair to say. And I will say the passion, it's moving up a little in the tier list with the passion with which you're saying this. But at the same time, it's so over the top, this one. To me, that I think there's the multiple styles that don't help it. To me, it feels very art project with that. It feels like, oh, I've got to get as many styles in as possible got to get the word count up.
Wait, I have to interrupt you there.
I know.
This is like, to me, and maybe this is just me, but to me this feels like the most, unless you hate violence and fun, which maybe you do hate fun, but unless you just really don't like violence, like, to me this is like one of the most accessible films because it's got so much going for it. It's got like amazingly choreographed action, like super stylish action. It's fucking hilarious. It's like one of the funniest films he's ever made. It's also like in terms of like narrative depth and like likable characters, I think that the bride, I think she's just called the bride, right?
Just in this one.
Yeah. She's like a very likable, interesting protagonist who you're kind of rooting for. I love that she's super skilled, but like the whole film she's constantly on the back foot. And like in both films she's like constantly like put in these like horrendous situations, and she just has to fucking like beast mode out of that. It manages to up the stakes so consistently across the film and doesn't just drive that into the ground and make her like a boring, overpowered character. Like, there are points in this film where you really feel like she's completely fucked, but she just like, you know, keeps going through. To me, like, it's just, if someone was like, I've never seen a Quentin Tarantino film before and I just wanted to give them like, you know, the ice cold water, this is what it's like. To me, this is like the go-to one.
Well, that makes sense because this was my first Tarantino film.
I will say, actually, there is an element of an identity kind of crisis I'm feeling just from your guys' description here, in that, you know, it's hilarious and yet there's these deep-rooted undertones, and for me, I think they're kind of at odds with each other.
No, I don't agree with
That-
that.
that's me personally.
I think a film can be like. I think there are plenty of films, even films that aren't necessarily comedies, that will have like more sort of moments of brevity in order to perhaps heighten.
Well, Black Klansman.
You can have-
in so much
that's
as-
a silly film
Yeah.
with a
Yeah, that's a comedy film that like has dark
a-
elements. Yeah,
yeah.
That's a great comparison because it's also quite stylistically similar in some ways.
But I walked away remembering that film, and this is a film I struggle to remember.
I guess, I mean, given that this is the first half of a wider narrative, this film doesn't have so much in terms of like a large story. I'd be really interested, I still haven't done this, watching this and part 2 back to back.
Yeah, I've never done the whole block.
I did that.
Oh, did
first
you?
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I think this film does work in terms of the classic 3-act structure, but the fact that it kind of focuses on the build-up to this one huge fight with someone that is sort of actually kind of less important in the grand scheme of the revenge she's getting. It's more just it's almost her like origin story of like
it's like a superhero.
This
origin
is the
story.
most, it's not the most important person she needs to kill, but it's super important in terms of getting her to a level where she can do
Yeah.
what she needs to do in the second part. I can maybe concede or see your point in that, it might not be super memorable in that realistically all that happens in this film is she kills Vivica Grey Fox, gets out of hospital, and then kills Lucy Liu. And, that takes the place over the course of 2 and a bit hours. So
If you're looking at the film as like a piece of code, then yeah.
well, Jacob is a scientist, so maybe that's how he's approaching it. We can only speculate. But yeah, fundamentally, this film, I absolutely do not see the sort of the goofy comedic moments and the more harrowing, serious, and then violent moments as being incompatible at all. I think you're hammering home the violence by having a fight scene stop when a child walks through the door. Really cements just how awful of a thing she's about to do. She's about to deprive a child of her mother. They are like covered in blood. Like when you see this pristine, like innocent child staring up at them, you realise like just how sort of depraved what they're doing is.
But that's what makes that scene so good, because like wherever a lesser film, like say like a Marvel film, that would be like just a moment to quip and relieve the tension. But when the child arrives there, it isn't to sacrifice the tension or the drama or the stakes of the scene. It actually, whilst it's got a comedic element to it, like hi honey, some cereal, it's it actually raises the stakes and makes it more intense, and then makes what happens afterwards more meaningful.
Yeah, because she has the moral dilemma all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Before it was just I killed because I need
and it
revenge.
shows you like how determined and kind of how bad of a person she is.
Yeah,
in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. Like how the depths to which someone will go for like that utmost revenge. Yeah.
And the fact that it's right at the beginning of the film is, I don't know, it just works. It's one of those things. I don't know how he manages to do the non-linear pacing so effectively.
I do want to make it clear, I don't want to understate how cool the action scenes in this are.
Well, you haven't talked about that, Jacob. Say something nice about this film.
Say something nice and we can make up. The 2 action scenes, the main one, the opening scene and that final scene. That final scene I remember just like almost being like mind blown the entire time.
It's one of the all-time greats, to be fair.
The fact that it it's not one of those that this action scene's dragging on. It's the way I'm like, oh, and there's more. In such a good way. I think that's really cool. And the first intro fighting scene is fun.
Great sound effects.
And the bwee bwee is hilarious.
Where do you want to put it on the tiers, Jacob?
I was going to say C. I think though, you've spoken me round. I'd be happy with B.
So we're going S and S.
Yeah, we're going 2 S's. So where does this leave us, Jacob?
I think at this rate, nothing's going in. Well, actually, no, we'll get to it. But yeah, A or S. I can see it. The passion, like I said, the passion with which you speak about this. I'll go on. Have your little treat from the shop.
Yes. Yeah, I get the S tier I wanted.
I guess that leads us pretty neatly into Kill Bill 2. I guess a lot of the things we just discussed essentially apply to Kill Bill 2. It is a very different film, but I guess we don't have to go quite
thematically. It's the
Yeah.
same, but like the greater interaction with Bill as a character is you know, one of the more important.
It's a much
aspects.
quieter, less over the top film than
Yeah.
Kill Bill 1 to quite a noticeable extent, and I actually like the fact that it's two separate films, and I'd like to see them both together, but I actually kind of like that they're two separate films and he didn't release it as one.
Well,
like
they
he
do
intended
feel
to. Because they do feel distinct.
yeah,
Yeah.
They do feel different.
Yeah, and Kill Bill 2 to me is much more quiet and character driven. It has some amazing holy shit moments that keep it on the same level in terms of just pure entertainment to me as Kill Bill 1. Maybe nothing quite as spectacular as just like, you know, all-time blowout as that final fight scene in Kill Bill 1.
Yeah.
But to me, like the bit where she's buried alive is amazing.
Love it.
The fight with, I can't remember the character's name, in the caravan thing.
Oh
is
god,
excellent.
Ellie.
With the snake. That's a
where
great
she
scene.
leaves the snake.
And I think the final interaction between her and Bill and the resolution of the film is just absolutely perfect. So yeah, that's
it's kind of an inverse in terms of like the spectacle, but it's in my opinion more impactful in terms of its emotion. Before we get to what you have to say, Jacob, because you may be bringing us down again, but I do want to shout out one of my favourite training montages ever.
Oh god, he's so good. That guy's like an OG kung fu actor as well.
Yeah, I love how much Tarantino goes in for like the hammy over the top kung fu style, where it's like bordering on magic, where she swings at him and he jumps in the air and lands on like the end of her sword. I love that shit. He's always stroking his ridiculously long moustache.
So good.
He's amazing, and that whole scene
10 out of 10,
is fucking brilliant. But Jacob, please bring us crashing back down to earth.
Yeah.
Fuck!
While you talked me round with Kill Bill 1, you are not selling me on this. Yeah, no, that's being inflammatory again. Come on. Woo. It feels like a kid's film.
Oh, what?
In what way?
What the fuck?
Wait, you got to clarify that immediately.
Right. I think that going to the sensei, the training montage, I think the buried alive stuff was pretty cool, but everything post that I think is rubbish.
What about the snake scene?
The 5 punch thing?
Five finger death punch.
God damn it, you said it at the same time.
Isn't that what it's actually called in the film?
Yeah.
It's actually called that.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate that she hits him 5 times and he's like, alright,
But it's more ceremonial than it is like supposed to be this grand climax. It's
basically the arc of Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
in one
true.
film.
Yeah, but it's about what it means to kill someone that she has such like an intimate emotional connection with, rather than the actual like mechanics of performing a 5 finger death punch.
But because it's been so silly to this, in my view, this is I have more gravitated towards the light-hearted side of the Kill Bill films.
Okay.
I mean, it's called Kill Bill.
Yeah, quite goofy, but again, it's like kind of pastiche kung fu-y. Like
I think you can. I just don't think that you have to have one or the other. I think you can have.
No,
both.
I
You can have like
get
a
it.
silly.
Things aren't black and white. I get that.
Yeah.
But for me, there's so much of one that it's hard to see the other. And I think because you've not got the finale like you had in the last one, where it's one of those that's like, it's an incredible achievement of cinema, you know, to have that amount going on. To then have a scene that's supposed to be personal, but I've not been sold up until that point on that side of it.
Are you not sold on their relationship, like
No.
between David Carradine and Uma Thurman?
No, I'm not. I've been enjoying the ride, but not really like bothered about it. And so when you get to this scene, it's a wash. I'm like, oh, well, why would I care about any of this?
Well, I've had it described to me as being quite Shakespearean, as like a kind of tragedy or even a tragicomedy of kind of this, you know, this grand melodramatic scope that would often be, would often appear in those sorts of stage plays, right?
I can see this as a good stage play.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of Tarantino's films do work in that sense. But I think this kind of larger than life or death stakes played out in this like incredibly sprawling way really has this like incredible intensity and like gravity to it. I'm surprised that you don't connect with the relationship between David Carradine and Uma Thurman, because I think that's like a really compelling one, because it's kind of a simultaneous master-apprentice relationship as well as it being a kind of a more romantic one. There's a kind of fatherly aspect to it. I don't know, it works so well, and I think that's why it's so impactful at the end, because, you know, this film, both films have a sort of strong sort of feminist lean to it, of like this a woman reclaiming her agency and taking revenge against those that took it from her, but at the same time she has like such intimate emotional links to the people that did this to her. So it's not as simple as a wash of like, oh, this guy did a bad thing to me and I'm gonna kill him. It's like the most important person in my life did the most awful thing to me that they could possibly have done. And
then like, there's a man stroking a beard.
But that's kind of this tragicomedy aspect to it, right?
But those things are, to me, like,
but it's
just so easy
so
to
multiple
have both
personalities to me. It's like one is affecting me appreciating the other aspect.
But it's the montage sequence is consistent with the tone of the film as a whole, because every single film ever has multiple tones, right? There's very few films you'll find that has just like one consistent tone. Maybe you could come up with an example, but off the top of my head I can't think of any, right? The tones of this film, like many Quentin Tarantino films, is basically just like tonal extremity in one direction or the other. And that's kind of across the board for most of his films, except, you know, maybe something like Jackie Brown. Right. Because this film is either being, you know, for the most part, ridiculously violent, very funny, both of those at the same time, or incredibly violent and, you know, quite emotionally impactful at the same time, or just incredibly violent. And I don't think, you know, that's obviously like quite a blunt way to describe it, but I don't really, because the film is consistent in doing that across the board, there's never really a moment for me where, if the whole film became incredibly quiet and bland the entire time, that would be tonally inconsistent, but it never does. It just remains unpredictable. You know, the writing style remains the same, and the way the action is shot remains the same. It keeps. It doesn't feel like two different films. I'm not saying that. It's just that I gravitate towards what one of the tones is so in your face. That's what has stuck with me. Well, you're wrong, but that's okay. When the ending is supposed to be more on the somber tone, I've not been there. I've not matched up with the film like that. So we miss each other on that. We don't have that. What do you call it? That Wiz Khalifa song playing in that last song for me. For me, it's just okay. Bye. Where would you put it on the tiers then, Jacob? It's D. You're wrong. I mean, to me, this is S. I actually might prefer this even to Kill Bill 1. Oh, I don't think I agree with that. But that's outrageous. I love Kill Bill 1 so much, but you can see them as one film, but they're both S tiers. Kill Bill 1, as great as it is, does lack some of that emotional intensity that I long for, and this film acts as the context in a way for a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, definitely deliver it. I get it. It's fine. Sorry. What? Would you just say? Nah, you'll see it in the edit. Great. I get what you're saying. It does deliver something else. I guess I just love Kill Bill 1. No, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me. Jacob will. Yeah. I know I'm going to get beaten after this. Should we? It's a good thing you live miles and miles and miles away from us, Jacob. Otherwise, it's not that many miles. Well, yeah, I could drive there right now. Jacob was watch the news after this for a murder in Cambridge. Should we say, based on my high dislike, is it an A? If you're willing to go with an A, I would absolutely. Yeah. I'd happily. I mean, I want to take it as high as we're allowed. Yeah. So an A it is. I think it would be right. Look, if you've got two S's and one of the S's is saying like this is the best. It might. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say which is my favourite Tarantino film, but at least 3 of his films are 10s to me. So yeah. Anyway, what do we move on to now? On to Death Proof, which is, I guess, one of the more divisive Tarantino films. Not one of his most liked. I know some people absolutely love it, and I know most people tend to think it's just a bit odd. It was kind of a strange released film as well, because it was put out in the Grindhouse double with Planet Terror by Robert Rodriguez. That's a great film, underrated. But yeah, Death Proof is, I guess it's another sort of revenge-ish film. Well, it's kind of sort of a slasher that is then turned on its head. Also like one of those like 70s/80s films about a guy with a car. True, yeah, like an inverted version of something like Vanishing Point or
bullet.
Yeah, like I think that's kind of what it's going for, but like with this kind of serial killer edge to it,
Right. Yeah.
which on paper sounds fucking amazing, but to me this film is pretty middle of the road for Tarantino.
Oh, good pun.
Hey, I didn't even realise I was doing that.
Yeah, Jacob, what do you reckon on Death Proof?
Oh, it's just a load of rubbish. It's funny, and I get that this is not supposed to be like a grand artistic statement. Or maybe it is, and maybe like Tarantino goes, no, this is my perfect film.
I think this is very much supposed to be a pastiche and an homage to like a silly, schlocky B-movie, like 70s horror stuff. So he's purposefully made this to be as the kind of like low-key as it is.
I think for me, he's too good a director though to be that B-side. Unfortunately, I think he sneaks in just too few many intriguing elements that leaves me feeling more disappointed, because I found the first like bar scene goes on quite a while, and in that I'm finding all the interactions and all the characters really quite interesting. I'm like, what is this film going to be?
Yeah, like where's he going to take this? Yeah,
and then it does such a 180 in a way. I'm like, oh, and then there's almost the part 2, and I'm like, right, well, I know what it is now, but I'm kind of like, well, why did you have all of that at the beginning? Because it's not sold me anymore on what's happening here.
I think basically the film acts as a smaller version of the bit in Pulp Fiction where John Travolta gets shot by Bruce Willis, and you're kind of like, oh shit. Except in Pulp Fiction, that is kind of a great shock that doesn't affect the enjoyment, and that's cleverly written in using the non-linearity to kind of throw a curveball at the audience. Whereas this film always feels like a prank on the audience, where it does all of this setup very extensively, and then kind of goes, haha, psych.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a middle finger rather than it being a surprise. It's
I was going to say, the one in Pulp Fiction is, oh god, whereas this is, oh. And it feels like he was writing another Tarantino-style film, and then Robert Rodriguez came along and said, yo, this is supposed to be stupid, right? You forgot what we agreed to do, and he's gone,
yeah, but
oh shit, okay, I'll just write this bit now.
Jake, I don't know if you've seen Planet Terror, Jacob.
I haven't, no.
But if you'd have seen that as kind of context to what you're saying, this film would be 100 times sillier if Robert Rodriguez had gone anywhere fucking near.
Oh, yeah, you don't
because
know about
Planet Terror is fucking nuts, and we should. You know what? I now want to do a reaction to it. I think we genuinely should get you on to do a reaction.
I mean, Planet Terror is.
It's so funny. I mean, I don't want to oversell it. Jacob, it's shit. You'll hate it. Okay, there we go. Now he might enjoy it.
Nice.
He never knows.
Nice.
Okay,
and I won't cotton on to your secret nefarious plan either.
Yeah, the mute button works like that, right? Sick. Okay.
You've used subtle language there that means I won't quite pick up on the code you're talking in.
I think we seem to agree quite strongly on this one.
I mean, I don't absolutely hate it. I do think there's really good elements to it. I think like even though I think that the plot twist in the middle ultimately works to the film's detriment, I think when it happens, it's pretty cool. Like there's this shot of like a woman's face just getting crushed by a tire, just like bashing her face, and like I think Kurt Russell's pretty excellent in it.
I mean, Kurt Russell is excellent.
Yeah, he's great. And I love the bar scene with him kind of interacting with them and that kind of sinister build up where he's like going to drop one of them home, and like he ends up doing all this other stuff. For me, like I think the twist could have worked. It's just that I find the second group of girls way more fucking annoying and less
so
likable.
Annoying.
He includes Zoe Bell, I think she's a Kiwi actor.
Oh yeah.
Who is she's an excellent stunt woman, but I kind of hate her as an actor. I think she's terrible, but you know, very talented. Yeah, it just like whenever she's in a film, I find her really annoying.
She just has an abrasive personality.
Yeah, and she seems to play herself and everything, which is not necessarily a problem. Her presence, she annoys me.
So
you're
saying you specifically hate her.
I don't,
because you just
hate
said
is overselling it.
She plays herself in every film. I hate it when she plays herself in every I hate this.
Mate, look, all I'm saying is that I would just rather she wasn't there. And I'm sure she's a lovely person.
No, she'll be okay with that.
Yeah. Cool. I don't think I've,
I mean, we're not going to be sort of tweeting this at Zoe Bell.
Yeah. Well, you might not be.
What I'm saying is, clearly the reason they did it is so they get her to hang on to the car bonnet for real, right?
Yeah,
for that final chase, which is like kind of cool that they did it for real.
But the context makes me so annoyed. I'm like, don't. Like, you're clearly pissing off. Stop it.
It's a film with good elements. I wouldn't call it a bad film, and
I don't hate it either. Like,
when I watch it, I actually kind of enjoy a lot of it. For me, it's more that, unlike a lot of Tarantino films, I guess it does have something interesting to say in using this a character like Kurt Russell, who might sort of be seen as like really cool and macho and kick-ass in the 80s, and kind of spinning him as a creepy, twisted weirdo.
Yeah.
I kind of love that, and I think he's great in the film. And I think a lot of the dialogue in the film is pretty good, although I do think it's a bit of a step down from the stuff we've seen before from Tarantino.
I would go a step further with that.
Yeah.
And say, particularly, okay, so first half of the film, I pretty much echo everything that you two have both said. Interesting, intriguing, and then bang, pranked. And it's like a bit of an anticlimax, but there's some interesting. It's kind of the shock of it on first watch is still fairly effective.
No, it's effective.
And the violence of it is gratifying in its own twisted way. Second half of the film, I hate. Straight up, I hate it.
I don't mind the final car chase. It's okay.
I hate
it's
final car chase, whatever, it's alright. And I have kind of somewhat reevaluated the final bit where they're just kicking the shit out of him. But again, it's like all that Tarantino does this whole film is prank the audience, like consistent. It's not just like one big prank in the middle. The ending is a prank as well, because it's like, okay, right, we've had the reveal that he's actually a murderer and he's not this lovely guy that's being super charming. He's a twisted creep. So now we're going to watch him go around killing everyone. Psych, he's actually going to get punked out by the first group of girls we meet from this point on, and he's going to get beaten to death.
And he gets beaten soundly. Once she's off the car, then all the stakes for me are gone.
I kind of like that, honestly.
No, I mean, I thought when she's on the car, I'm like, okay, they're gonna I'm ready for this one to die in the most horrific way possible, and then it's a revenge story on that part. But instead, she just gets off the car and they get in and they're like, right, now we're gonna fuck you up. I'm like, oh. And so everything that happens post that point, I feel like I'm not invested, because I'm like, well, I know he's going to lose. Like, he was obviously going to lose at the start of this.
For me, it's more that the final car chase is the climax of the film, and not the bit where they beat him up. That's just kind of...
No, I mean, that is more like epilogue.
I like the beating up bit just because it meant that the film was over.
I think that's a funny non sequitur to end the film. And it's an interesting subversion where it's like, oh, you think these girls are fucked? It's like, no, actually, they're just kicking shit. I just don't think the car chase is that good
for a film about a car chase.
It's okay.
The car chase isn't that good.
It's pretty good, and there are impressive elements to it.
I think my biggest problem with it is, like you were saying about the dialogue being subpar for Tarantino. I actively feel like the dialogue feels like it was written by someone impersonating Tarantino. It doesn't feel like Tarantino at all. It feels pastiche of his own style. They have this kind of opening conversation in the second half of the film where they're doing the kind of rotating camera around the table as they're having this conversation.
I think it's black and white for no reason in this film as well.
Right, and it's reminiscent of Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that. But just the complete drop-off in quality of not only the dialogue but the characters as well. I hate all of these characters. They're all so grating to me. I can't
agree with that.
I can't quite put my finger on why, but they all
Zoe
just
Bell.
but they all just seem so smug and irritating and like lacking in any sort of charisma. And that's something that Tarantino is usually so great at. And again, it's like, well, if you're writing these characters to like punk out this fucking serial killer, surely you would want them to be like badass. They're sick, but he's written these badasses to be the most irritating cocksure.
Yeah, I guess that does remove some of the enjoyability of the final gag, but yeah, I just think it's like a decent film. I just don't
let's go tiers with it then.
Yeah,
I'd say like D. It's not F. It's not like an F tier film. There's like quite a lot going for it. It's just that I think overall when it comes,
I think for Tarantino it is an F. I would say for Tarantino I'd say this is a fail.
I think to give, but to me,
I'm happy with D.
What I'll say is, to me, like in terms of how we interpret the tiers, like an F is like a fail. And to me, that's like the film just doesn't work on any level. Right. And to be fair, I don't think Tarantino actually has any of those.
Not in my
Spoiler,
mind.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is as bad as it gets.
This is as bad as it gets, and it's still like a decent film.
It's interesting.
Actually, you know what? Okay,
it has interest to it.
Yeah.
Like if I was going out of 10, I'd give it like a 5.
Yeah.
Like there's things about it I hate, there's things about it I like. You know what I would say actually? We were talking about earlier about how Reservoir Dogs is super like well contained and efficient. It's like hour and a half bang in and out. Like where a lot of Tarantino films from that point on take their time and they're more measured and they can be more gratuitous with the amount of time they spend doing random other shit. Death Proof is one of those films that could really have done with more time, because I feel like what we get is a setup for a character and then the conclusion to a character, and we don't get any time to really like enjoy or invest ourselves in the world of what this character has actually done. I think it kind of cuts to the chase, but skips out all of the stuff that I would have found interesting.
Well, what I'll say is, what's weird is I think the way it was released really impacted how the film is, because if you watch it in the Grindhouse duology, I guess, it's much more fun and kind of enjoyable, because you kind of get this sense of like, oh, it's silly, cheesy fun, and it's kind of throwaway-ish, and it's like a B movie. Whereas the first time I watched it, I really, really didn't like it, because I just watched it by itself, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's kind. I guess it's kind of tied to its own context, but that isn't to say that it can't be evaluated.
You can evaluate it by itself, but I think that, in my experience anyways, you kind of lose something without that, which is actually a criticism of the film.
And again, like, I would say to anyone watching this that hasn't seen it, like, if you haven't seen The Grindhouse, if you do like Death Proof, or even if you're only mildly interested in it, and maybe you have or haven't seen Planet Terror, watching the two together is great, because
with the adverts
in the middle are so wonderful. Like,
I did watch those.
Mate, what was your favourite?
It was the was it Edgar Wright did one?
Well, was it Don't?
Don't, yeah, that was absolutely
fucking fire.
You're
that
both
is
wrong.
so
Machete is the best.
Oh, okay, Machete's so Machete's so good they made an
Machete.
actual film out of it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the Machete film, and I don't want to.
I did watch Machete, and so therefore it's tainted for me.
Machete, what are you doing with my wife and daughter?
You've messed with the wrong Mexican.
Oh man, but Don't is
also
fucking huge. So we're all agreed on D tier.
We're all agreed on D tier.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my mind, this is where modern Tarantino kind of began.
Yeah.
For some reason in my mind, Death Proof is like the last of like kind of retro-y Tarantino. Because to me, this film, I don't know what it is, it's just a feeling. It's not that the films are like, it's obviously nothing to do with the setting or like the themes of the films. It's just, to me, that these all film, it just feels like a more modern era.
No, I agree as well.
Yeah. We start with, this one is Inglourious Basterds, which I think was like one of his most commercially successful at the time as well.
Yeah.
Could be wrong there, but I think it was like a bigger hit. Jacob, what do you think of Inglourious Basterds?
This is Tarantino at his best. This to me is...
Hey, we finally did it. We got positive feedback from Jacob.
I liked Reservoir Dogs. And
oh yeah. Well, we've just been waiting for so long.
It's been 3 films since I said anything nice. This is one of my favourite films of all time.
Straight up,
just to point out how like polarizing my relationship with Quentin Tarantino has been. You know, there are films that everyone loves that I hate, but Inglourious Basterds works so well, and it's the setting. I think the fact that, you know, again, it's very, very intense conversations, which he's so good at. But he doesn't need to worry necessarily about... He's given it the context by going World War II. That is the ultimate grounding for sinister conversations with lots of violence, because that's what the time was. So having Christoph Waltz being so unbelievably fucking haunting. I mean, that opening scene is absolutely ridiculously great. Just that would be an incredibly powerful short film.
You know what I said about Pulp Fiction being like just loads of great scenes? To me, Inglourious Basterds has like... Even though I'm probably going to be a bit more negative on this than you, Jacob, and maybe you, Adam, like, to me, like, some of the scenes in this film just are the best. Like, you could just watch them by themselves. They're just such great, like, scenes, and like they go on for like the perfect amount of time. They're so well acted. They have like such a brilliant level of tension and payoff, and they're funny. So like, if you just took some of the scenes by themselves out of the context of the film, they're just like some of the best stuff he's ever done, for sure.
Yeah. I think with some of my issues, you know, previously, like with Kill Bill, where I said that the tonal shifts kind of, it was a problem. I think having this rooted in such a time of such darkness and horrible things, and then throwing in the occasional silly moment is a kind of nice moment of brevity that reminds you that you're not in, this is a film. So for me, this is where it works in this film so much better, and that's why I connect so well with it, because those are kind of welcome reliefs from, you know, remembering what a horrible thing this is a take on. And of course, Hitler's death. To me, this is kind of where the alternate universe, this is the start really of the alternate universe, really.
It's the first in his historical revenge trilogy.
Yeah, it's where you've got the actual, you know, it's where he's rewriting history. it is a moment that makes you go, yes!
Yeah, I hate Hitler too.
I love that they're so invested in killing Hitler that they completely forget that they have bombs strapped to them.
Not only that, but the person who shoots Hitler is BJ Novak from The Office.
Yeah, that's great.
True.
That's great.
See, I hadn't seen The American Office when I watched this film the first like 4 times.
It's Ryan.
So when I watched it most recently, I was like, oh my god, I now have context for what this really wacky casting decision.
Just got Ryan killing Hitler, which in itself is just a fantastic play. But
if only it was Mindy as well.
But yeah, I think I'm not sure the name of the actor who plays the cinema owner, but I think her performance is fantastic.
I think we should just say like amazing performances across the board.
Yeah.
Obviously, Christoph Waltz. I don't know. He didn't get an Oscar for this, did he? But
he got nominated.
But he got an Oscar for Django, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, which is insane. To me, it seems like that Oscar was because he didn't get the Oscar for
Probably,
this.
yeah.
In my mind. Even though he's great in that as well. But this is just spectacular.
To me, though, my favourite performance in the film is Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender does
Michael Fassbender.
So good.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like Christopher Waltz is like untouchable in terms of like best performance in the film, but like my favourite is Michael Fassbender. Not just because he's so good, but that sequence. I think I'm with you.
It's an incredible fucking
like
the
that
or the opening in that room.
The opening is great as well. I mean, it just like to me, like the film is kind of made up of chunks. So I mean, like another one of my favourite scenes is the one where they have the Nazi officer and the Jew bear comes out of the cave with the baseball bat. That's like another just like great scene. I fucking love that scene. And like the finale.
Brad Pitt's Italian accent.
Buongiorno.
I'm going to be completely honest here. One of my criticisms of this film is that, unlike something like Pulp Fiction, where you have a kind of scattered narrative, this is obviously not really non-linear. Is this film never really feels to me like you have a character who you're kind of like,
specifically focusing.
Yeah, like it isn't, obviously Pulp Fiction also doesn't have that, but to me it feels like it's more guided and specific, and it has a more logical flow to it. This film does feel a little bit more scattershot in terms of have a scene, then have a scene, then have a scene, have a scene, and in a way it's quite jarring and visceral, so it works. But at the same time, I feel like that character is supposed to be Brad Pitt, and he isn't. While he's kind of funny and charming in the film, his character doesn't really do much, and he just kind of breezes through these situations for the most part in a way that most of the other characters just don't seem to be able to get away with.
You forget that this film has Shrek in it.
Yeah, that is a fucking jarring cameo as well. Jesus Christ. Jump scare warning for that.
I think there's something to be said for Brad Pitt's character being kind of this like untouchable stereotype in a way, because he's almost like, I guess in some strange way he's almost a stereotype of an American at war. Or at least the portrayals in media of Americans at war.
I imagine that's what he's going for,
When you've got a villain as cartoonishly evil as the Nazis in this, then having someone so cartoonishly good who's this kind of like very charismatic but very silly American who's a bit clueless.
And the fact that he has to be like the most American, he has to even be like part Apache, because then he's like I'm not just an American, I'm native, you know. Like,
but here's my problem with that, okay? Michael Fassbender is the British equivalent, and he dies. So why does Brad Pitt get?
Yeah, but he goes out.
Why does Brad Pitt?
He goes out speaking.
If I'm good to go out, I'm good to go out speaking the Queens.
He says kings.
The kings.
Yeah, because it's the King's English.
Oh no.
Yeah, we don't have a queen in the 40s, do we?
Oh, true. Fuck. Yeah. I don't know. To me, like Brad Pitt's character.
So what you're saying is it's just general anti-American saltiness.
No, it's also I don't think his performance is that good, and also like at the end of the film, you're kind of like.
I will say when I first watched it, I was like, loved the film, but what the fuck was happening with Brad Pitt? The more I watched it, the more I was like, no, that's genius. There's just something genius about it. I can't necessarily specifically defend it beyond it just being something I find funny. And I think Tarantino is the kind of director. I think a lot of directors do this, but he's very open about it, where he just does something something because he thinks it's fun.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
He's just like, you know what? I don't care if this really makes sense, but if it's cool and it's fun to watch and it adds to the experience in some way, I will include it.
No,
Brad Pitt.
It speaks to the quality of the film.
You've got terrifying Christopher Waltz going over, and you're like, oh no, they're going to blow the cover, and you've just got Brad Pitt being so silly.
Buongiorno. It's like, how's the weather in Italy? He asks him some like really convoluted question. He just goes, right.
That bit is really funny. To me, that's like where his character works best. But it feels weird to have the comedic relief as your kind of like main perspective. Ultimately, it speaks to the quality.
Scene is also terrifying. Like when the
but
the German
that's why the film's so good.
Daniel
Brunel.
Yeah, he plays that role so fantastically.
He's great. He's so good in it.
Yeah, it's such a for quite a relatively small role. He has such a lasting impact in my mind.
I love the about turn he does because I think they really try and romanticize his character. It's really clever in the way they do it. He tries to normalize himself to the cinema owner, right? And I'm not just this war hero. I'm like everyone knows me as a celebrity, but I am like
he's
a real
just humble bragging.
I'm like this down to earth guy. Like you should give me a chance.
And not only that, he's kind of trying to come across as like, I know I did all this stuff, but like I'm not about that.
Yeah, he's like, oh, that's kind of cringe, bro. Like I just did what I had to do. And then at the end, when she reveals herself to him and betrays him. Well, not betrays him, just does
turns him down essentially.
Yeah, he then gets his gun out. It's like, you bitch! Like, and it's like, oh, okay, true colours shone brightly.
And I love that because it is a thing where you go, oh well, maybe this guy actually isn't that bad. Maybe this is his redemption moment.
Yeah,
but it's not. But it's in a good way.
Yeah. And you know what I love? Tarantino is brave enough and bold enough to go, are Nazis real people? No! And then he's like, kill them all!
Yeah, I do love that.
And, the burning cinema, like, with the burning Nazi paraphernalia everywhere is a powerful, like...
Yeah.
Well, it's Cribs a shot off of Metropolis in that bit with her like laughing as the like curtains go up. She's like ha 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 ha, and then like all the flames are going up. It's a great bit. Ultimately, the Brad Pitt thing just doesn't really matter that much as a criticism. It like detracts from my enjoyment so minimally. I still love the film. Every scene in the film is just great. You can just breeze through it. It's a bit like weirdly paced, I guess, but again, it's a minor criticism. It doesn't really matter because the rest of the film is just so fucking good. It also doesn't have that great of a soundtrack for a Tarantino film. It mostly just takes songs he's already used. Again, it just doesn't really matter because the whole thing, like all the action is great. Every scene is just great. Every character is so... Is at the same time that classic Tarantino thing where they're a complete stereotype, but they also kind of have this depth to them. Yeah. And you also kind of want to hang out with them, except for Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, quite.
You want to run over a French Alp away from it.
Yeah, no one has ever made ordering a glass of milk quite that terrifying.
Yeah, but I mean, now anytime someone does it, if I ever witness that, I will think that they're a serial killer.
If you drink a glass
of
Nazi. Milk, you are probably a Nazi. That is
if you order it, imagine sitting down in a restaurant, going, waiter, give me your finest semi-skim, please.
And you're like, no, you're a Nazi, get out.
So for me, this would be an A tier. This is not quite S.
S tier, straight up.
I've been overruled.
Yeah. Jacob, let's do it.
Let's put
it in S tier.
Yeah,
now we're the ones to... Yeah, Rupert, you're always such a cynic.
You know what?
I'm sick of your negative attitude.
I'm fine with it. I can take it. Give it to me all day.
That's all right. I'm about to... it's all right, Adam. Can we at this moment just appreciate being on the same side because it's about to fall apart again?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I know it's about to fall apart. I know why. So the next film...
I'll miss you, Adam.
The next film in the historical revenge trilogy is Django Unchained with Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz again, and I guess it's kind of the same film as Inglourious Basterds, but completely not, because it's about a completely different subject. Instead of Quentin Tarantino going, man, I hate Nazis, I wish I could shoot Hitler in the face, it's, man, I hate racism, I hate slave owners, I wish I could shoot them all in the face. And he does that with Django Unchained, which I think was my first Tarantino film. And yeah, I love this film. It has many of the same issues as Inglourious Basterds. To me, I maybe slightly prefer it to Inglourious Basterds because it doesn't really have that issue of a coherent through line throughout the story, because you have Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz.
It's such a specific linear.
Yeah, exactly. exactly, and it kind of eschews that weird structuring for kind of a much more. Again, I never really thought about this. For a Tarantino film, it's actually much more straightforward. To me, I love this film. It's kind of like Inglourious Basterds, where there's just so many fucking great scenes, great performances throughout. That I could, watch a lot of these scenes just by themselves and enjoy them with their own like internal narrative to them. Jacob, go and say something wrong. if you don't like this film, you probably like racism and slavery.
Well, okay, that's a horrible thing to prove.
Go on, Jacob. Go on.
Now you have that gauntlet laid down for you, Jacob. Choose your next words carefully.
I love it. Yes, don't hate me. No, I don't hate this. This was a film that at the time I'd just seen Inglourious Basterds. I think just after this had come out, Inglourious Basterds was like, I was like, oh man, I've turned around on Tarantino, saw this had come out and was like, right, I'm gonna love this. And the first time it fell flat for me enough that I was like, ugh. And I've gone back since, and I don't hate it, but it's one that I found myself, whereas I think to a degree Inglourious Basterds does suffer a bit, like you say, it's a collection of scenes. And there isn't that through story, and normally I like a through story, but in this I think there's too much. I think there's such a complete origin story that at points I'm like, I don't care about this bit.
I think I actually basically agree with that. I do think the film is
like over-explained.
I think the film is overly long, and I do think it dwells where it maybe doesn't need to, and the pacing could be a lot better than what it is. I don't think this film needs to be anywhere near as long.
I think that's a fair.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I fall a bit off with like the montage in between when he starts bounty hunting, but I'm back in when they get to the plantation with Leonardo DiCaprio. You've got some just ridiculously great scenes in there.
Leo is fucking amazing.
Leonardo DiCaprio as the villain is excellent.
But that final scene after that, the big shootout, I'm so not into at all.
I will say straight out, I do really, really like this film, but where I have loved so many Tarantino films up until this point, I merely really, really like this film. There's a little gap between my absolute overwhelming adoration of his other films and my massive appreciation of this film. And I can't quite describe to you what it is about this film that kind of separates it from the others, but there is just something that doesn't click with me. Perhaps it's like the pacing is a little bit off. It does lose my interest at points, but the moments that are huge, and then the performances, as we've said, across the board are fantastic, including Jamie Foxx.
I think Jamie Foxx is so underrated.
He's underrated because
he does a great job.
He has a very muted role because he plays the straight man in amongst the sea.
He's just a great action
characters.
hero.
Yeah. He plays it straight down the line. But he still gets his cool kill lines and stuff.
And he shows emotion where he's needed to.
Yeah,
as well. It's just like not a flashy performance. I guess it's because he's next to the flashiest performance.
And then Leo comes in later, who's also hamming it to the gills. And those are genius performances. But yeah, I think if Jamie Foxx was going for something, I don't know, he's shown he can do hammy like in Baby Driver, right? Yeah. He's fantastic in Baby Driver, and if he was doing that sort of shit, it would be just like three people going at it at the same time.
He's the core of the film,
Yeah, so you do need that. The set pieces and the historical and thematic importance of the film is massive and very powerful. But I don't think it's as effective as something like Kill Bill at getting across that thematic power. I
guess what this has over something like Inglourious Basterds is this is also, to me, weirdly kind of also a bit funnier than Inglourious Basterds. It has because Christoph Waltz is just very funny in the film. It also has just like some of the best gags. It has Samuel L. Jackson in it, who is a really interesting character, but he's also just fucking hilarious.
Right.
You've got that great scene with the Ku Klux Klan
with Jonah Hill.
That's such a good scene.
Which is like, as a throwaway comedic scene, is so funny, and the payoff for it is so great.
Yeah, I love them. That's great. It's also just poking fun at a group of people that you like to poke fun at.
Yeah, exactly. It's just great in every way, and then they just look like fucking idiots the entire time. But it doesn't feel like really preachy. It's not like, man, racism's bad. It's like, look at these fucking idiots. I'm going to blow them up.
While also highlighting the stupidity of wearing bags on your head.
Yeah, exactly. It highlights the absurdity of it without feeling like it's kind of wagging its finger.
It's like the Are We the Baddies sketch almost.
I can kind of see what you say about the last set piece. I guess it is a bit, in terms of tension, and like it's not really like quite the same set pieces in terms of just orchestrated chaos that just like builds and builds like it is in Inglourious Basterds. I can see that being like the more satisfying ending, but I do kind of just like the chaos that it brings.
It's so violent. It might be one of the goriest that he's done at that point.
Oh yeah.
Because I guess maybe excluding Kill Bill, and with Kill Bill he had to make it black and white. I love the bit that they do where he says, "Say bye to what's
Miss Candy."
Bye, Miss Laura.
He shoots her and she
like,
flies off in a
backwards.
completely different direction.
That's great.
Which is genius. And then when they're having the shootout and he's like this insane like OP sharpshooter and like everyone keeps fucking up, and I love the bit with the gag where the guy is like been shot and he's like on the floor and they keep shooting through his legs by accident. He's like, oh god,
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I guess to me, like, I love Inglourious Basterds, but I probably just feel like I have just a little... I would basically rate these films the same, but I feel like I just have a little bit more fun when I'm watching Django.
And you have that, like, you know...
And I guess it's the first
personal
one.
connection. Yeah.
It's just like... And I love, like, the sound... I think the soundtrack's better in this one. Like, it's got some of those, like, random bits where it'll just play, like, completely anachronistic music, where, like, there's, like, bits where, like, Rick Ross just starts playing.
Oh, I see.
Where he, like, chucks the guy off the horse. And, yeah, to me, it's just, like... It's just a joyful film.
Oh, also a great cameo from the man himself, Tarantino, where he gets blown up. That's so fucking
I love
great.
that sequence where they're just fucking idiots. They just like
He's doing
give
an
him
Australian accent for some reason.
It's the guy from Wolf Creek as well.
Oh yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
Christ.
For me, this would be A tier.
I think I would also go A tier. Yeah.
For me, it's a B because that's
much more
really
positive than I expected from you, Jacob.
It's like I said, it's a film that like I've gone back to and appreciate a lot more, but I still think there are bits of this that I do switch off for a good like quarter of the film, I want to say.
Well, I disagree with you, a disappointing amount less than I thought.
Yeah, no,
that was a good sentence.
Just think about it.
no, I mean, Jacob,
Think about
any
it.
opportunity we have to see almost eye to eye is one I relish. So yeah. Where are we going to put this then?
Well, you said A, I said A. Jacob
So
said
yeah,
B,
it belongs A.
Alright. Yeah, okay.
There's only one tier between it. And yeah, I guess the next one interrupts the Revenge trilogy. The Hateful Eight is another sort of neo-Western Tarantino film.
It feels like Django DLC.
Sort of, but it's also like a back to roots moment. I guess if
is.
you wanted to describe it in the most blunt way possible, it's kind of like Django plus Reservoir Dogs. Right.
Yeah.
Western Civil War era film set in one cabin for the most part. Jacob, what do you think about The Hateful Eight?
This was one that took me 3 attempts to finish. The first 2 times I checked out. So I seen that beginning snow like in transit scene so many times. But actually the 3rd time when I finally was able to kind of get over the hump, once they're all in the house and things kick off, that's when this film gets golden.
Oh,
So you like this film?
shit. He likes it.
Yeah, it takes so long to get there. I don't think there's like this great payoff. I think it's like a solidly like interesting, just like Reservoir Dogs, just kind of like you've got all these characters revealing parts of themselves all stuck together in this house. The setting makes sense, but it just opens so slowly. Because even when the first point they're in the house, I don't care. Like, I really feel that like the introduction of characters it's almost natural to the point that it is boring.
Like, it's definitely his most, like, no pun intended, his most glacially paced. This is the film of his that most feels like a straight theatre adaptation.
Yeah, which is interesting because he has subsequently, or at least said he would turn it into a play.
I think it may have even originally been intended
right
as a theatre production.
So yeah, our comparisons of Tarantino's work to theatre productions, he has seemingly acknowledged that himself, and this film is like a genuine attempt at that.
I think the performances are great in this.
Samuel L. Jackson is excellent in this.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The ending's alright. It's not necessarily satisfying.
It's so satisfying. It's so satisfying.
Oh, see, so to me, I'm kind of like, I didn't really like any of you.
No, but it's like a kind of, well, one, the ending is racism is bad in a funny way. Like it's told fun. It's basically it's a redemption arc for the white racist character who goes, you know what, black people aren't bad, and they
but women. Oh, let's hang it.
Well, all right, dodgy territory perhaps. But
no, but it's. I love that it's a film that isn't kind of afraid to shy away from the fact that the characters are bad people, and they're entertaining, but it's okay to like them anyways a little bit, because this character is way more hateable. So fuck them.
And I love the fuck it, I don't care anymore attitude of like, it's kind of a bit of a middle finger to the audience, but rather than it being something like Death Proof, which I found grating and annoying, it's like kind of wonderful and kind of earned, because it's just like all these dickheads have been just trying to like murder each other over this bounty, or like or trying to protect this person.
It's so frustrating to watch.
And Samuel L. Jackson is just like, I want to watch it all burn. I don't care anymore. Like these people died, and they died for nothing, and I'm going to make sure they died for nothing. And I kind of rate that. Again, it hugely ties into like the revenge thing. Tarantino loves a revenge film.
To me, this film almost does seem like it might be more in reaction to criticism he's received, because it does start off very restrained, still very Tarantino-y in the dialogue, but it feels like way more like reserved and held back. And then it's like, you know, you have that halfway point in the film where he literally just starts talking over the film, explaining things. And you have that scene where they all just start vomiting blood, where it's like, you know, this film kind of feels like, like you said, similarly to Death Proof, it's a sucker punch, but it works much better.
I again love this film, but it's good that you're here, Jacob, because it really would just be me sucking my own dick at this point. I think this is one of his most underrated films, almost not underrated, but contentious films, I think, in recent memory. There's a general consensus that most of his last 4 films are great, but this is the one that's like, some people really fucking hate it. Which is why it's a nice surprise that you do enjoy it, Jacob. But it makes sense. If you enjoyed Reservoir Dogs, then it feels that kind of template quite neatly.
I do get why people don't like it. It's probably, to me, his least accessible film.
No, that's fair. But I think that for those that have the patience and are willing to sit with it, it's a wonderful thriller mystery type thing. In like this really closed down way. It's very old fashioned. I mean, again, like it not only feels like a stage play in its kind of limited use of sets and locations, but the story it tells is like a kind of classic ye old stage.
Well, he's also just such a talented writer. He just pulls off the vibes so well.
But like this, I don't know, this is like something like The Mousetrap or something, like, you know, one of those old theatre shows that's been played for like a million years at this point.
But just with his flavour.
With his flavour, exactly.
I do actually agree with Jacob that I don't think the twist is really like the twist is really all that like amazing in terms of like with the Channing Tatum appearance and all of that stuff. But I do think it's as a plot machination, just like, this is what's
the amazing twist isn't Channing Tatum's reveal. The amazing twist is when he gets his head blown off, because that's what it is. Again, it's not just it. You know, we're talking about how they kill the woman at the end, it being like a fuck you, like everything was for nothing kind of moment. That's also that, but for the twist, he's built up to this twist, and he's like, bang, here you go. This is I'm playing some 4D chess with you lads. I had these guys here the whole goddamn time. Psych, this guy gets bitched the fuck out immediately. He's dead. There's your real twist. What you thought mattered didn't matter. Which I guess is kind of the message of the whole film. It's like, you know, nothing matters.
Well, it's more that like you could almost read a more wholesome message into it. It's like, you know, I get that we don't get along, but if we're gonna hate each other, can't we just agree to hate the right people together before we hate each other? Right. That's kind of how I interpret the film anyways. But I also want to know what the fuck he was feeding Walton Goggins in this film, because he's not a great actor, but in this he's fucking amazing.
Maybe he's just the kind of actor that needs a great director. You know?
Maybe that poison was real. He was like, nah, if you don't want to go out proper.
He doesn't drink it, Jacob. He's one.
No, that's what I'm saying. He's like, look, I'll give it to you as well.
He was threatening it on set.
Are you saying he really genuinely killed Kurt Russell in this film?
No, have you seen him since? No.
But he's right.
Also, before we close off on the Hateful Eight, shout out to Jennifer Jason Leigh, because she is so disgusting in this film.
Yeah, she's like wonderfully hateable. Yeah,
must have been I don't know how much fun it would have been for her, but my god, what a brilliant performance in terms of just absolute filth.
Doesn't she constantly get covered in blood as well?
Yeah, she gets constantly covered in blood. She gets like her teeth knocked out, which makes me cringe horribly.
Oh,
like,
right, yeah.
She's just like filthy, slimy, and like she's the kind of character you feel like you should feel sorry for, but she's just so disgusting and horrible.
Again, it's Tarantino going, you know, everyone's so used to putting nuance in their films. I'm going to make something that is black and white. This woman is evil. And you should hate her. And everything that happens to her.
The way he plays with your expectation does kind of make it a bit more nuanced in a way. Yeah. Because you come in with that, he kind of quite makes you question your own like baggage.
I guess what I'm saying is that Tarantino has the answers and they are binary.
Yeah.
They are black and white. But he's going to make you think that there is more to it.
Yeah. That's the trick. Yeah.
My final sign off for this, and I'll give this my tiering as well, is that for a film where they're literally locked in a house, I should have loved this a bit more. I feel just because 8 people locked in a house should be Tarantino's like at his best, and I don't think this film quite is. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's really good. But like, I just would have expected this setting to have yielded more fruit.
I can see that.
So for me, it's a B.
I could actually kind of agree with a B to an extent. I think I probably like it a bit more, but in terms of like,
if we're going by our our grading system of by Tarantino's own standards,
it's not as good as Django or Inglourious Basterds. I don't think.
I actually might think it is. Now you know what? I actually straight up really enjoy this film. So I would go an A tier, but I'd happily concede a B tier, given that
it's like between for me. It's not one or the other.
It drags in terms of it drags in its pacing. Well, lads, do we want to just put it in B tier so that there's
I'm back, Jacob. B tier.
Me and Rupert, friends for life.
Well, we can also make the list look a bit more aesthetic rather than every single film in A tier and then like one in a couple of other tiers. But no, there are definitely faults to this film. I think it is valid, Jacob, to say if you look at this alongside Reservoir Dogs, which it shares so much in common with, where that film succeeds in using its brevity to enhance the tension and the character dynamics.
I don't think it has as much going on, in my opinion, despite the fact that Reservoir Dogs is shorter. Feels like there's more to it. There's not really even a criticism, because Samuel L. Jackson's so great in this film and he has that great monologue, so you do get that kind of snapshot. But the film is less about the characters, weirdly, because obviously all the characters in Reservoir Dogs are quite anonymous. To me, I get a better sense of the characters in Reservoir Dogs than I do in Hateful Eight, and I think that's kind of by design, because the characters are all supposed to be you're supposed to kind of hate them, right? It's the Hateful Eight. Whereas in Reservoir Dogs, you are kind of sympathising with two of the characters for the most part, like quite heavily. I guess it's just a matter of taste. I think this film is excellent. It's just that for me, in terms of Tarantino, if I've got Django and I personally would have Inglourious Basterds in A tier, this has got to be a little low, which doesn't say anything that bad about the film, because you're in great company. Yeah,
we're kind of grading everything on like a shade of great to still great, but not quite as great, because that's just Tarantino's inherent quality. Unless your name's Jacob, in which case you're a
it's all over the place.
You contrarian.
Man's so inconsistent. Like, pick a lane.
I guess this finally brings us to our last film then.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is, I think, officially the final Tarantino film.
Is that official?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, filmmakers never really stick to this, so we'll probably get one more before he goes. But this is apparently his final, and very clearly at least part of this revenge trilogy thing he's had, in terms of just Tarantino righting all of the wrongs in history.
Don't worry, Tarantino's going to fix it.
Yeah, this time instead of Nazis, then he did slavery. He's now doing Hollywood, which is the other
the third biggest evil on this planet.
Well, I guess in a way this is his most personal film in a way, because it's like if you have these kind of grand societal historical horrors that he's trying to sort of through film right. This time it's something about his own life that he's passionate about. That he's going, well, if I could go reach back into my own childhood and change something, I would like to change this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it alongside slavery and fascism, it does seem like kind of petty, but I kind of rate that.
No, I think it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. It's just Jacob, what did you think of it?
I do like this film. This was a more inconsistent film for me. Actually, no, I take that back. I think it's actually quite consistently like a fairly high level with little peaks here and there. There's no moment where I was like actively put off or anything, but there are kind of large, like the middle kind of chunk of this film, I do find myself kind of lost a little when thinking back over it. Bits of this film do feel like the world just sort of happening, and so I kind of don't really necessarily think that this is a complete package is as good as Inglourious Basterds or Django to a level.
Jacob, I think I actually kind of completely agree with you, because to be fair, this is, I think, the only film I've seen of his that I've only seen twice. I think I've seen all of the other ones at least 3 times.
Okay.
So this might change when I see it again, but I do think this film is, by his standards, I think it's just good. There are qualities to it, and I can kind of see when people who love this film describe why they love it, and it's, you know, it's more, you mentioned Dazed and Confused earlier, it kind of reminds me of Dazed and Confused.
Yeah,
because it does have that, it's more of like a hangout movie, like almost like a road movie.
like a kind of stoner comedy type like layout to it.
With like a more sinister element to it.
Oh, for sure.
Like a comedic angle, and it does have some great moments, but it is obviously probably his most mature film, and for the most part I kind of agree with you, Jacob. It does have, like, in that middle point, I'm never bored by it.
No, I think that I have a constant sense of dread watching it the entire time about the Manson event coming up, because I know it is.
Yeah, and that so, is a great flip.
Yes,
yeah.
and
it almost feels like
it's
a
fantastic way of like keeping you invested.
Because
even though I think some of the Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio stuff I don't care about that much. Like I'm fine to watch their story, but I'm really like not particularly bothered. But then when you cut to I can't remember the actress who dies.
Sharon Tate.
Yeah, every scene with her in does make me go like, oh god. That does keep me trucking along nicely with the film. Kind of an interesting thing that we haven't really had in all the others, in that you're not waiting for a big event.
Unlike Django and Inglourious Basterds particularly, this is in a way his most consistent film, in the sense that not in quality, but in just like maintaining a steady pace. Whereas even something like The Hateful Eight, which is much sort of slower paced film, has much higher peaks and troughs throughout than this. This is his most kind of coasting, and then obviously a huge spike at the end.
Right.
But like it's much more chill. And I do disagree. I think that I personally think the stuff with Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio is really fun and cute. It's not like amazing, but I guess it's just supposed to be quite nice. Yeah.
It's very tonally different to many, if not all, of Tarantino's films up until this point, in that I guess sort of touching back on what I was saying about it being kind of his most personal film, in so much about it being so directly about his passion for film. Like it's kind of a film about film, right?
Yeah.
It's about a struggling actor, a struggling stuntman. I guess a kind of a romanticization of old Hollywood, the era in which Tarantino would have grown up, and kind of, I don't know, essentially imagining his own like sort of Hollywood fan fiction of, like, you know, he goes in, he's like a big star of westerns, and then he goes off to star in the spaghetti westerns and shit like that, and then interweaves his, you know, the tragedy of the Sharon Tate story with his classic flip of the narrative. But I think in terms of the tone of the film being so subdued, I think is probably, and this is speculation, but probably reflective of his own feelings, his own kind of rose-tinted spectacles of the era, right?
It is one of those classic love letter and also a hate letter things, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's certainly not avoiding criticizing Hollywood in this film, but a lot of it, you know, in the way it focuses on Leo, particularly Leonardo DiCaprio's character, as this kind of like helpless, off his prime actor that feels like he should be one place and is in another. There's like a kind of real simplistic charm to it that it feels very warm and wholesome in a way that so few of Tarantino's films have ever felt.
No, I do get that.
I think he's appealing to something far more like youthful within himself, like calling back, and I think that translates very effectively.
It feels like his first old man movie.
It does feel like an old man movie, but in
a good way.
Yeah, not in a tired like, oh, things were better in my day way. More in a here is a reflection of my youth on film. In a matter of speaking.
I agree. I like it for all those qualities, and I do think it's just like, you know, his writing's really good. It's really funny, and I like that there's these long sequences where essentially nothing's happening, but it can still be quite tense. Like I particularly like the scene where he goes to the Manson ranch.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, like
That's a great scene.
that is a sequence where your average person could go like, oh, nothing happened there, but like
it's so tense.
It's so tense and it's
so on the edge during that.
Yeah. It's just like is uncomfortable. And it's like very well orchestrated in terms of like the way that scene flows. Then it has a pretty satisfying payoff as well. But it's just great. And then
he beats the shit out of that
I guess I can't like, for me this was also the first time I watched this in a cinema by myself, and it was like a pretty small crowd. Yeah, well, I love it. I am a loser. And it was just like I kind of enjoyed the film, and I was like, oh, it wasn't what I was expecting. And then the second time I saw it in Picture House with a big crowd, and that was the way to do it, because I still loved the finale the first time I saw it, but getting to see that with a crowd of people literally like cheering and going mental,
it was
as Brad Pitt destroys a woman's face against the telephone. It's so good.
You know what I love about that final set piece to me is the film has been so restrained to that point. For it to like hit 100th gear out of fucking nowhere, it like, even if with Tarantino has been more, and it obviously is a matter of perspective and opinion, even if he's been more violent in the past in terms of bloodshed or whatever, the absolute like complete juxtaposition of where we were to where we go makes it feel like the most violent thing I've ever seen. Like watching that woman's face get smashed to a pulp against a fireplace in my head is like one of the most violent things I've ever seen. And then the woman screaming, there's something blood curdling about the scream that woman utters when she's being mauled by a dog. It is genuinely one of it's haunting, but also they're murderers, so I don't care.
But it's so satisfying.
I'm like, you know what?
And then who gets? Is it the guy who gets flamethrowered?
No, she gets flamethrowered.
What happens to the guy?
Like, he gets his balls ripped off by the dog.
That's it.
And she's like been attacked by the dog, I think. And then
he like whistles and the dog like leaps off.
Yeah, and then she runs outside and then she like flails into the pool.
High tier film dog.
Oh yeah.
In terms of if you're going to rank film dogs, I don't know what the name of the dog
Welcome
is.
to the tier list within the tier list, where we
like,
rank the cinematic
all the dogs in films. Like that is a great dog.
I'm sorry, we are absolutely doing a dog tier list.
Number 1 through 12, Snow Dogs.
Snow Dogs is low down on the list. You got a Toto to compete.
Quadruple S tier, Air Bud.
Space Bud is above Air
Cinematic units.
What about the dog from I Am Legend? That's a C tier dog.
No, it turned into a zombie. Fuck that dog.
Yeah.
It was so weak it got killed by Will Smith.
Yeah, true. Yeah, weak ass dog.
How do you get the French Prince?
Or what about the dogs in Cats and Dogs?
Prince of Bel-Air.
Huh? Like the dogs in Cats and Dogs.
Were
they
played by Elijah Wood? No, sorry, Tobey Maguire. Pretty weak.
Mate, but that's got Jeff Goldblum. Anyway.
Jeff Goldblum S tier on our best film dogs.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, lad. Where are we ranking it?
I do want to say what I do like is that Brad Pitt and Leonardo have very different stories in this. Being the actor, he's all very much kind of appearances, and it's a lot more vain. You know, he's the guy who's on camera, he's the guy who gets all the recognition and fame. And his story is more about him struggling with himself.
Yeah.
Being very inwardly focused. While the stuntman, who's, he's not okay with it per se, but he accepts his role.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
And then the fact that he's more aware of the real threat outside. I mean, he's not at the end, but like he's picking up on this weird ranch. He goes to the ranch. While Leonardo's kind of having his only real battle is with himself.
Yeah,
I do like that kind of those two different, the way they're utilised and the way they both fall into those roles. Like what Brad Pitt does is visceral and up close and disgusting and real, and then Leonardo has a flamethrower, and that feels like they're both you know, gratuitous, but in very different ways.
Yeah.
But I love that bit as well as a character arc for Leo, because like one of his struggles is like, oh god, I'm an actor, I'm not like a real person, and now I can't even act, so like what am I?
Yeah.
Like I'm just completely useless. And then like his arc is like at the end of the film, he's like, oh, I have this prop and I know how to use it because I'm an actor. I used it so I can be, I'm a real person. So he flamethrowers a murderer. It's fucking great.
And then it finishes with people, family next door being like, oh, cool. And he's like, nah, networking.
Yeah. He adds them on LinkedIn, yeah. Where are we ranking it?
I personally ate it.
I'm torn between A and B.
I would say B personally, but that's not to say I
Oh no, have I got the final choice?
You do, Jacob.
You do.
Make the move.
Now, who has upset me the most during this? I'm going to go B.
In the film.
I'm trying not to take that personally, Jake.
It's got highs, obviously, like the ending is fantastic, but I think the fact that it's kind of only one really big kind of, the ranch scene, I guess, but not enough really. It's not got those same highs, those same memorable Tarantino moments.
No, I'll concede that, but I was saying earlier about it kind of being this more like, you know, rosy, warm trip, sort of nostalgic trip to the past. I don't think this film really needs that kind of thing. I understand, you know, it's something we've come to expect from Tarantino, so I do respect that if you prefer that aspect of his directing style and it's missing from this film, then absolutely, like, yeah, this it doesn't have that level of interest to it. But I think this film more than makes up for it in its emotional weight, and it's just the simple but kind of charmingly told story. It feels very personal to me, and I get a lot out of that. I think it's incredibly charming and gratifying as an experience.
My problem with it isn't the lack of excitement throughout, because it's clearly not going for that. But I can see that being a problem, like Jacob said. But for me, it's more just that it is of high quality, but like some of it is just not as good as the rest of it, if that makes sense. Like I know particularly some of the stuff with Leo on set is pretty good. Like one of the scenes that I just straight up think is a bit sort of muddled in the film is the scene where like they're doing the fake film, and just the way it's shot and presented, because they kind of present it like it's all just kind of happening, right? Yeah. And it's kind of like this like an anti-force wall break, I guess, where they're like going into a fiction within a fiction. Right. To me, like for Tarantino, there should be like, this should be like presented in a really interesting way, but it's kind of presented quite like flatly, and like when he fucks up, they just kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like you could have done something more interesting there, or like. There are just like bits like that.
I guess that is a missed opportunity, for some like more creative filmmaking.
It's still a great film, and I mean, like, if my standard is that high, where that's like, you know, going to put it in B tier, it just goes to show like how great.
But it has the great sort of punchline at the end of it, where the little girl goes up to him and says, "That's the best acting I've ever seen."
Also, just to finish this off, I do enjoy is I know that they've got the running gag of the cigarettes of his alternate universe.
Oh yeah,
and they're having an extended like. Almost like Toy Story 2 level outtakes. I thought was just kind of a nice, if this is the end, that's a nice note for him to end on.
No, I like that. Yeah,
that was great. That was a great finale.
And he like puts it out at the end. He's like, I can't smoke
like
these.
Shit. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we do get one more from Quentin Tarantino. I think
hopefully we get loads more. 10 is not enough.
Hopefully he can do something cool, even if it is just stage plays or something. Like if I have to watch a stage play on YouTube, just. Give me more Quentin Tarantino, because
you'll pay and go and get a ticket, won't you?
Yeah. I'll buy it on YouTube. Yeah. But yeah, I think we all agree, basically, apart from Jacob, that he's a great director.
We all, apart from a third of us, agree.
66% of the British public agree that Tarantino is a great director.
I think even Jacob will concede that Tarantino is a great director. Tell me if I'm wrong.
He has great potential.
Fuck you.
If he would just realise that and be a bit more consistent with his delivery. And he's also, you know, he has got the N-word pass apparently, so...
He does. He's given it to himself.
He's written it into his...
Well, no, I think he may actually have it from Samuel L. Jackson.
I think he wrote it... Hands it over to him.
He wrote it into this... you know, I think that he's written it into a script somewhere that Samuel L. Jackson gives him the N-word pass.
I think you could see an interview where Samuel L. Jackson basically gives him the N-word pass.
Yeah, no, I've seen
but I think that was scripted.
And who am I to argue with Samuel L. Jackson? Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, at least like or dislike the video. Come on. If you liked it, then you should obviously subscribe as well. What's the point of just liking the video? Subscribe
to Splash Zone Gamers.
Yeah, you can do that as well.
You can do that as well. Yeah, we also make video games.
There was still a sigh though. There was still a sigh.
Jacob, you have to always railroad us with the Splash Zone stuff. Come on.
Oh, don't you fucking go there. Hey, subscribe to Tasteless Reviews.
Oh yeah, and that.
Yeah. Oh god. Okay, this has been an eternally screening tier list. Thank you very much, Jacob, for joining us. We do make gaming content at the Splash Zone Gamers YouTube. Check that out. Subscribe and as Rupert says, if you've liked, you may as well subscribe. If you've subscribed, you may as well hit the bell as well.
Yeah, hit that motherfucker.
True, because we don't spam videos. We don't put out top tier content. So
exactly.
Content,
exactly. And with that, there'll be plenty more tier lists, reactions, and all the rest coming shortly. Let us know in the comments if you have anything you particularly want us to do with.
There'll be less Jacob as well with bad opinions. So
well, we can't actually promise that. It all depends on how well you get received, Jacob. But with that, thanks very much for watching.
Bye.
Peace.
See ya.
Welcome everyone, let's fuck.
Jacob, shut the fuck up. I don't want you to be here. Get out, Jacob. Leave. We're trying to record a video.